Shalom to all. Bruchim Habayim, Shalom Aleichem. My name is Mike Burston, and I had the privilege of performing a stage reading in Yiddish at the Holocaust Museum last weekend, a ballad that was written by Yitzhak Katzenelson while he was in the Warsaw Ghetto. It is my great honor to return to the museum today to join the community for this annual Yom HaShoah ceremony. Before we begin, as a cultural specific museum, it is important for us to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Tongva people. The Tongva people, also known as the Gabrielino Tongva tribe, have a rich cultural and spiritual heritage, and their presence and influence can still be felt throughout the region. We recognize the contributions of the many indigenous people from across Turtle Island who call Los Angeles their home today, including the Chumash, Tataviam, and Kitanemut. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and honor their continuing connection to this place where we are today. Heritage, culture, and intergenerational history are at the core of our work at the museum. Work that continues to be inspired by the fortitude and resilience of Holocaust survivors. We're very grateful for each and every one of you. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask many of the Holocaust survivors in attendance here today to stand if you are able, or wave your hand so that we may recognize your courage, strength, and wisdom. Would you please rise and let us show our gratitude. Thank you. You generously give your time to educate our students and visitors about the Holocaust and your hope for the future, and we are indebted and honored. You are always at the heart of our work, and your messages will continue to be a fundamental part of our educational programs. And just a personal note before we begin, as I'm sure most of you know, Evan Gershkovitz is an American journalist and reporter at the Wall Street Journal covering Russia. He was detained by Russia's Federal Security Services on charges of espionage last month, making the first time an American journalist had been detained since the Cold War. He's the American son of Soviet-born Jewish exiles. Since we just celebrated our Passover holiday, celebrating freedom from enslavement by Pharaoh in Egypt, I feel we must all do whatever we can to help free Evan from his enslavement by the present-day Pharaoh in Moscow. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce to you Guy Lipa, Board Chair of Holocaust Museum, LA.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Holocaust Museum LA's 31st annual Yom HaShoah Commemoration ceremony. As the grandson of Holocaust survivors, Yom HaShoah has always been a very profound and solemn day for our family. It's a day when people all over the world pause to commemorate the 6 million Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust, as well as the heroism and resistance of the Jewish people. Its observance serves to honor our beloved survivors, renew our commitment to never forget, and speak out against antisemitism and hatred in all of its destructive forms. Holocaust Museum LA's founding survivors had the courage, leadership, and foresight to create a memorial at a time when most of society was uninterested in learning about this important piece of history. They wanted to create a reflective place to memorialize their loved ones and share their experience with the public. Together, we now carry forward this mission to commemorate those who were murdered, honor those who survived, educate future generations about the Holocaust, and inspire a more dignified and humane world, which remains more critical than ever today. This is why I'm so proud to work closely with our partner organizations, our museum staff, our dedicated volunteers, and incredible docents who teach every day about the vital lessons and continued social relevance of the Holocaust. They empower students and visitors to speak out and stand up against anti-Semitism, bigotry, and hatred. The ADL's recently released annual data of anti-Semitic incidents revealed that 2022 saw the highest number of anti-Semitic incidents on record in more than 3 decades. Jeffrey Abrams will share more about this in his report later on in our program and what we can do to combat the rising tide of hatred. Holocaust Museum LA is proud to work together with the ADL, American Jewish Committee, and the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles in building community and fighting anti-Semitism. Thank you to the ADL and Jewish Federation for your partnership in today's ceremony. We know that education is our greatest catalyst for change. One of the museum's founding members, Jonah Goldrich, once said, "It is important to teach the young generation about the Holocaust. The world wants to forget the biggest horror mankind ever created, the murder of 6 million Jews by a country that was at the time considered the most cultured and enlightened in the world." We share Jonah's charge when he said, "I'm fighting against forgetting. For me, it is not just to honor the memory of my survivor grandparents, but also to secure the future for my son." I want to acknowledge several special guests in attendance today. Please stand when I call your name. The Honorable Los Angeles Mayor, Karen Bass. Former Los Angeles City Controller, Ron Galprin. Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District Board Member, John Keene. Councilmember Tim McCosker. Hey, Tim. LAUSD Board Member Nick Melvoin. County Supervisor Holly Mitchell. The Consul General of Israel, Dr. Hillel Newman. Thank you also to the Consulate General of Israel in Los Angeles for your support of today's ceremony. We very much appreciate it. California State Senator Josh Newman. Consul General of Austria, Dr. Michael Postel. Councilmember Nithya Raman. Deputy Consul General of Germany, Dirk Schultz. Consul General Marta Wolanski and Consul, I'm going to get this wrong, Margaretza Bakuzik from the Consulate General of the Republic of Poland in Los Angeles. I need transliteration in here, sorry. Councilmember Katy Yaroslavsky. And California Assemblymember Rick Chavez Zbur. I'd also like to ask my fellow board members to please stand for a moment so that we may thank you for your dedication to our mission and for your stewardship of our institution. If the board members of Holocaust Museum LA could please stand up. A heartfelt thank you to the 2 Gs and 3 Gs, the children and grandchildren of survivors, docents, volunteers, generous donors for joining us today. Several members of our board and 2G community are currently representing Holocaust Museum LA at the March of the Living in Poland. So they are not with us today, but they are doing great representation in Poland. A very special thank you to Nicole and Alan Munchnick for their generous support of this year's Yom HaShoah ceremony. We couldn't do this without your support. I'd like now to welcome international Jewish leader and social justice activist Rabbi Karen Fox, Rabbi Emerita the Rabbi Emerita of Wilshire Boulevard Temple and the first female rabbi in Jewish history to deliver the invocation.
It's my honor to be here. My name is Rabbi Karen Leah Fox. I'm a rabbi born in Los Angeles, 1951, daughter of Zenta Solomons Fox, born in Dortmund, Germany, granddaughter of Bertha Kahn Solomons, born in Dortmund, Germany, great-granddaughter of Lena Kahn Stern, born in Dortmund, Germany, murdered in Theresienstadt, 1943. My name is Karen Leah Fox, born in Los Angeles, 1951, daughter of David Fuchs, Dave Fox from Vienna, Austria, granddaughter of Avram Fuchs from Vienna, but really Lodz, Poland, great-granddaughter of Baruch Fuchs from Lodz, Poland, never heard again of any trace after 1943. My mother and her family had been a middle-class family in Dortmund, an industrial town in southwest Germany. They worked as business people and lawyers, and actually my great-aunt studied in university. They were very involved in their liberal synagogue and celebrated Jewish holidays, and of course, as many families in German Jewish tradition, they celebrated birthdays, and birthdays were a national event. However, after 1933, Jewish schools were closed. Jewish children were not allowed to enter public schools. There were only 500,000 Jews in Germany, a country of 67 million people. So Jews were less than 1%. And that 1% were seen as a threat to Nazi authority. After Kristallnacht, in November 9, 1938, my Dortmunder grandfather was beaten and imprisoned, their women's clothing store and home destroyed, as were homes, stores, markets, and shops all throughout Germany and Austria. And in Vienna, after Kristallnacht, my father and his family realized they too had to escape as soon as possible. Between 1933 and 1945, Nazi Germans killed 2 out of 3 Jewish people. In 1933, there were 9 million Jews of many European nationalities and cultural interests. And by 1945, 6 million Jews and 400,000 other people had been murdered. It is overwhelming to consider each life, each story, each name. And yet we are here to do so. I'm one of the lucky ones, one whose parents lived to tell their stories, to live fully as Jews and Americans here in Los Angeles. My parents, Dave and Zenta, met at the German Jewish Hiking Club in 1943. And for many years, my folks were quiet. They would not tell their survivor stories to my brother and I or other people. Yet through the Association of Refugee Survivors, through synagogue life and public education, we began to learn and appreciate their life history, their fears and hopes. My parents' stories are recorded in the Spielberg Holocaust Archives and the Leo Baeck Institute in New York, along with many of your family stories. When they grew older, my parents shared their life stories with school children, not only in Los Angeles, but also in Dortmund, Germany, and Vienna, Austria. My father was a graphic artist, and in 2009 proudly exhibited his artwork in Leopoldstadt, the second district in his old Jewish neighborhood in Vienna. A selection of Dave's artwork, Dave Fox's artwork, is on display today and has been for the last few months here at the Holocaust Museum of Los Angeles, and I'm grateful. Living proudly as a Jew and being grateful for family itself are the key legacies of my parents. And now that they are no longer here, I carry their legacy and have carried their legacy in my work and in my heart and soul to engage Jewish life, culture, and people. And yes, I am one of the lucky ones. My name is also Omi, Bubby, Grandma, Savta, but my grandkids call me Omi. I'm a grandmother to 4 kids, 1 living in New York and 3 living in the 2nd District in Vienna, Austria. David carries my father's name. Lena, my great-grandmother's. We are the lucky ones. May we continue to uplift our Jewish history through images, literature, music, dance, ritual, and names. And in so doing, may their memories, their sacred memories, extend forward for blessing. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Fox. Shira Kreitenberg, who is the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors and director, Greater Los Angeles at AIPAC, will now lead us in the national anthems of the United States and Israel.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Kol od balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homia ulfate mizrach kadima ein letzion Sophia od lo avta tikvatenu hatikva bat shnot alpayim liotam chofshi be'arsenu eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.
What a beautiful voice, Shira. Thank you so much. I think she deserves an applause for that. It is now my honor to introduce to you the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, and I'm glad to join you for this solemn and important event. It's always emotional to be here. You know, I'm of that generation that was born right after the Holocaust, and I grew up in this community, which means that my friends' parents were Holocaust survivors. And I remember at a very early age seeing the tattoos and understanding what that meant. I want to thank the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles for its work to preserve the living stories of the survivors and to assure that those stories are told to young people, to everyone. You know, we're in not so much in California, but kind of a perilous time in our country where some people are attempting to erase different parts of history. And for someone to ever, ever, ever dare say that there's some other way to teach about the Holocaust is absolutely unacceptable, and we can never, ever allow that to happen. As the numbers of survivors dwindle each year, institutions like this one are more important than ever. I've had the opportunity to tour the museum and meet with survivors on several different occasions. Looking back, you know, it might be easy for some to imagine that something as horrific as the Holocaust can't happen again, but we have to remember that evil can be very ordinary in daily actions. So events to me like this one serve multiple purposes: to remind us that we must stand against hate in whatever form it arises, whether it's graffiti on a sacred building or flyers left outside, or actual violence perpetrated in the name of racism or anti-Semitism, like the shootings of 2 Jewish men in Pico Robinson earlier this year. This event also is to remind us of what we share, which is more than what divides us. Stories of the Holocaust might seem distant, they don't to me, but once we start treating fellow human beings as other, completely different to us, then we can start to dehumanize them, discount them, and eventually view them as expendable or even disposable. We have to keep each other's humanities front and center, even when we disagree completely or when someone's lived experience is completely different than our own. I'm grateful to the museum for providing this annual commemoration and for giving people a chance to share these stories all around the year. Thank you for having me to mark this important day.
Thank you, Mayor Bass. Our community is fortunate to have you as an advocate for stamping out anti-Semitism and hate in Los Angeles. Please now welcome the Consul General of Israel, Dr. Hillel Newman.
Thank you, Mike. Shalom, everybody. Dear Holocaust survivors and their families, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, elected officials, faith leaders, and dignitaries who are here today, fellow diplomats, and Holocaust Museum CEO Beth Kian and the entire team of the museum. My friends, on Holocaust Day, Yom HaShoah, in Israel, sirens are sounded twice throughout the country, and everyone stops in their tracks, pedestrians in the streets, drivers in their cars, to take a moment of silence to remember the victims of the Holocaust. For 24 hours, the entire country, along with the global Jewish family, both within and outside of Israel, come together in collective grief. My father, born in Czechoslovakia, was saved in 1939 by two activists on behalf of the future state of Israel. His parents and brothers perished. I always regarded myself as a second-generation survivor, although my father was not in the camps. But I have no doubt that it drove me in many ways to be a diplomat on behalf of the State of Israel. This year we are marking the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and the uprisings at the Sobibor and Treblinka death camps. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which broke out on the eve of Passover, was the first urban rebellion against Nazi Germany. It was also the longest running with the largest number of participants. It lasted close to a month. Although it was doomed from the beginning, it was a source of inspiration for additional uprisings against the Nazis. It symbolized the moral necessity of resisting evil. Those who resisted did so with courage, human dignity, and defiance. Many additional acts of armed and unarmed Jewish resistance followed the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Today, in 2023, the importance of standing up together against pervasive and increasing hate crimes, including anti-Semitism, is essential. Sadly, hate crimes and anti-Semitism are on a rise in the US in general and even here in California. According to ADL's national findings last year, and we have ADL Executive Director Jeffrey Abrams here today to speak, California has the second highest number of anti-Semitic incidents in the country. During my post as Consul General for the last 3.5 years, I've observed many sad examples. Unprovoked attacks on Jewish diners at a sushi restaurant, vandalism against Jewish artifacts, synagogues and restaurants, graffiti spread upon synagogues, anti-Semitic flyers delivered in Jewish neighborhoods, signs plastered with death threats against Jews and Nazi salutes on the 405 freeway, and the resignation of a USC student vice president after being targeted for her Zionist identity. Make no mistake, the demonization of the one and only Jewish state is a manifestation of the same classic anti-Semitism. Most recently, we beheld Jewish worshippers shot in broad daylight, walking home from prayers. We appreciate the fact that the authorities here in Los Angeles, from Mayor Bass, through law enforcement and local elected officials, publicly denounce such activity and act with determination against the perpetrators. Only 1 month ago, I was invited to attend the press conference with Mayor Bass and Chief Moore on the shootings, and then the town hall gathering with Mayor Bass, in which clear statements were delivered. My extreme gratitude to you, Mayor, for taking a clear moral stand on this. Public statements are extremely important. The best guarantee of prevention of never again is a strong Israel. In prevention also, one of the most important factors is education. A recent study shows nearly a third of Americans are either unsure of what anti-Semitism means or never heard the term. In order to fight anti-Semitism, we must define it. That is why there must be continued support and adoption of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism. Deep appreciation to the Holocaust Museum of LA for the crucial work you do on a daily basis, especially in your contribution to the preservation of the memory of the Holocaust among all ages. We must not forget the lessons of the Holocaust. Our lessons from the Holocaust as the State of Israel are very clear. Every threat, every manifestation of hate, as small and insignificant as it may seem, should be taken seriously. We have learned that the burning of books leads to the burning of flesh. We know that the distance between verbal violence and physical violence can be minute. The second lesson is that we should all stand together against all forms of hate. We who belong to the camp of the moderates and oppose all forms of prejudice and racism must stand together. Israel and the Jewish community stand with other minorities when they are attacked. We marched with Martin Luther King Jr. in the fight for equality and freedom, and we funded a mural in solidarity with the Asian American community on their Federation building when they were attacked. I could go on. By being here today on Yom HaShoah, you have all made a statement against hate and in favor of remembrance. For that you are all to be commended. Hopefully, we will continue together, proactively, opposing hate material, discrimination, racism, and all forms of verbal and physical violence. That is what we should take from the courageous, brave resistors of the Warsaw Ghetto. We were inspired by them. Thank you.
And now, please welcome Beth Keane.
Thank you, Consul General Newman. We are very proud of our longstanding relationship with the Israeli Consulate of Los Angeles, so thank you. My name is Beth Keane. I'm the CEO of Holocaust Museum LA, and as the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, it's a privilege to join all of you here today on this important commemorative day. I'm feeling emotional because this is the first time we're gathering as a community since 2019, so forgive me. And just seeing all the survivors who are here with us right now, this is such a gift. So I'm just taking it all in as I stand here facing you all. This is truly a gift for all of us. Thank you to all of our survivors for being here today. In the fall of 1940, the Nazis established a hermetically sealed ghetto in Warsaw, a Polish city in which 30% of the population identified as Jewish. Nearly 500,000 Jews were cut off from the outside world, forced to live in 1.3 square miles. Forced starvation, inhumane living, constant violence, and rampant diseases led to mass death. Despite the unimaginable, horrid conditions, Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto found ways to resist. They celebrated holidays, set up schools, got married, documented their existence, and on the eve of Passover, 1943, the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto heroically rose in armed resistance against the Germans, holding them off for 27 days. Rachel Schwartz, one of the beloved survivors in our community and a Warsaw Ghetto survivor, tells us in her words, "We knew that the uprising was taking place because we heard the gunfire. Brave Jews between the ages of 18 and 30 were fighting back because they were finding out that Jews were being gassed in the camps. On the first night of Passover, the Germans found us in our apartment and they dragged us to the train station. There, our family was separated. This is the last time I saw my father and brothers. I was 12 years old." Rachel couldn't be with us today for a very good reason, though. She is celebrating her great-granddaughter's birthday in Michigan. But she continues to share her story of survival with students and visitors because she feels a sense of responsibility to carry forward her family's legacy. Hearing firsthand testimony from a Holocaust survivor is one of the most powerful tools for teaching about the Holocaust and personalizing its critical lessons to better understand today's events. Bearing witness allows us to preserve their memories and steward their critical messages. Throughout the Holocaust, Jewish men, women, and children responded to Nazi oppression with various forms of spiritual, intellectual, cultural, and physical resistance. They made conscious attempts to preserve the history, religious, and communal life. They also selflessly acted through armed resistance, in groups and alone, to save the lives of others. Today marks the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and the uprisings in the Sobibor and Treblinka death camps, and reminds us of the continued importance of standing up in the face of identity-based violence. Just as Holocaust survivor Rachel Schwartz still speaks to students at Holocaust Museum LA, together, we must renew our commitment to ensure preservation of survivor testimony and to teach and engage with students and the public in ways that empowers them to speak out and stand up against hatred, bigotry, and anti-Semitism. Through my work, I am fortunate to continue to honor my own legacy, sharing stories about my grandparents, Rose and Arnold Rakoshinsky, who were survivors, and how their acts of bravery in Auschwitz, Ravensbrück, and numerous labor camps taught me kindness and compassion. But today, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce their daughter, my mother, Helen Isaacson, to share more about our family story.
Hello. What does it mean to never forget when there's so much that you don't know to begin with? As you heard, my name is Helen Isaacson. I'm the daughter of Holocaust survivors Rose Frischer Rakoshinsky of blessed memory, and Arnold Rakoshinsky, whose yahrzeit coincidentally is today. So this is very meaningful. Both were from Sosnowiec, Poland. I'm also the relative of treasured aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents who I never had the joy of knowing, and whose beautiful stories I'm struggling to piece together to this day. Like many of my generation, I have been defined by my parents' history. I was born in the shadow of the Holocaust just 18 months after their liberation. But my life as a second-generation survivor, or 2G as we're known now, has been very different from those born in this country like the Rabbi, who arrived here. They came into families whose scars were still very, very deep and very profound, but they were blessed to settle into a home in a safe country, and their first language was English. I, on the other hand, started kindergarten at 4 and a half, not only speaking just Yiddish and Polish, but I didn't even know this language called English existed. Thank goodness for an older teacher who realized who and what I was and spoke to me in Yiddish. It saved my life. My parents told me that I was born and spent my first years of life in the Landsberg, Germany displaced persons camp. But my birth certificate says I was born nearby in Kaufbeuren, Germany. The date on there, January 25th, 1947, may be the right birthday because I know from many, many family stories that I was born during a terrible snowstorm, but it's the wrong city and the wrong country. For many of us 2Gs, even the so-called facts of our births somehow don't uncover the truth, and it took me 6 decades to uncover the truth of my own story and better understand why my parents fabricated it. Here's what I've learned. My parents met after the war in their hometown, as I said, Sosnowiec, Poland. They managed to quickly get married and have a baby, me, and based on some surviving photos, they even managed to look rather fashionable. But Poland wasn't safe for Jews even after the war. Anti-Semitic attacks were very pervasive, and dozens of Jewish survivors were killed by locals after returning home from the camps. Russians who occupied Poland then were starting to make it harder and harder to leave. My parents' dream was always to come to the United States, so escape, yes, escape, from Poland was their only option. Doing so with a baby was no doubt very complicated, but in the late summer of 1947, when I was just 8 months old, we left. We were part of a small group of survivors organized by my Uncle Dave of blessed memory, who was active in the post-war underground. We traveled by foot mostly through very dangerous territory from Sosnowiec all the way to Germany. I was the only baby on the journey, and had my uncle not been the organizer, I likely would have been killed by others in the group for making too much noise. The fear of being discovered making this illegal trip was constant and terrifying. My mother kept me quiet, breastfeeding me as I made noise. Fortunately, I was a hungry baby. Somehow we made it to Landsberg. We stayed for 2 years, but this was always intended as an interim stop on our journey to a better life. My parents and I arrived in New York City on August 9th, 1949. I was 2.5 years old. We arrived on a naval transport ship called the USS General House, and stepping off that ship remains as one of my earliest childhood memories. Growing up in the US, I was always acutely aware of how different my family was from my friends, and it wasn't just the accents. It was a time that few really understood the history of what happened during the Holocaust. It was such a new part of our history. Most of what I learned then was from hearing bits of stories and hearing strange words like lager, meaning concentration camp. And in those days, our families were referred to not as survivors, but instead as refugees, or in Yiddish as Grina. You can figure that out. Often I was so conflicted. On the one hand, I just wanted to be a normal American girl. On the other hand, I had so much empathy for my parents, and I felt such guilt trying to live this carefree life in a new place. I could see how times of joy were always tempered by memories of loved ones that were lost in the all too recent past. It wasn't until I was adult that I also realized how unusual it was that my entire nuclear family, including aunts and uncles, were all under the age of 30. I literally remember almost every family relative celebrating their 30th birthday because the survivors typically were so young. The strangest part, though, was not having any grandparents, particularly at the holidays. Now I'm gonna cry. When I had my first baby, my daughter Beth, who you all know, the most profound joy that I felt was that she was blessed with 4 grandparents. To this day, the realization of her good fortune brings tears to my eyes. In July 2016, I traveled to Poland and Germany with my daughters Beth and my daughter Stacy and my husband Richard. We walked the streets where my parents lived as innocent children and witnessed the places at Auschwitz-Birkenau where our loved ones and ancestors experienced the most vile horrors of humanity. Today, I never think of my beloved grandparents without remembering that I stood on the path that they stumbled down on their way to the gas chambers. Last year, a relative in Mexico sent me a photo of my father as a very young boy. I knew he sang in the choir of his synagogue, but actually seeing this little boy standing proudly on the bima with the other boys and his uncle, a renowned cantor, threw me for a loop. I cannot tell you how emotionally overwhelming it was, and still is, for me to see a picture of my father as a child. Most survivors lost everything from their pasts, both people and possessions. I now have this one picture to capture my entire family legacy, many generations represented by one small image. I always hope for new discoveries like this one, but most of these lead to even more questions. There are still so many gaps in my family story with no one left to help me fill them in. And so I return to the question that I started with. What does it mean to never forget when there's so much I do not and cannot know? The practical and emotional difficulties of answering that question are made all the more challenging against the backdrop of rampant and intensifying anti-Semitism today. This is precisely why Holocaust Museum LA's work is more important than ever. With primary witnesses rapidly disappearing, it's the moral imperative of 2 Gs to continue to search for answers, remember our shared history, and educate younger generations on what happened. A case in point, it turns out that the image of my father as a young boy is the only known photo of the interior of the Great Sosnovitz Synagogue. It was burned by the Nazis in 1939, and it's on display proudly in the museum today. Continuing this work is complicated, especially as I struggle daily to understand a family legacy of which I know only snippets. But as I try to piece together the jigsaw puzzle that is my family roots, I know that whether or not I ever find the answers, I will never back down from the challenge. Thank you.
There's an expression in Yiddish Das Apple fällt nicht weit vom Bäumerle. For those of you who know Yiddish, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Please now welcome Los Angeles City Councilmember Katy Yaroslavsky.
Thank you, Mike, for that introduction. I will try and follow what you just heard. I don't know how, but I will try. It's an honor to be here today to commemorate Yom HaShoah, both as councilwoman for this district and as a proud Jew and mother of 3 young Jewish kids. It's also a privilege to represent the home of the Holocaust Museum LA, the first survivor-founded and oldest Holocaust museum in the United States. The work that this museum does to educate the people, and specifically the students of Los Angeles and beyond, could not be more important. You know that, which is why you're all supporters of the museum. As I mentioned, I have 3 young kids, and my oldest, Gabriel, just recently turned 8. For those of you who joined us to the International Holocaust Remembrance Day event back in January, you might recall the story I told about a conversation I had with him late last year. He'd come home from school sobbing. He'd just learned about the Holocaust for the first time. He was trying to fight back tears unsuccessfully, horrified at the thought that humanity was capable of such evil. And he asked me how we know that it won't happen again. I told him that it won't, because it's up to us to make sure that it never does. I've been thinking a lot about that conversation recently, as well as the significance of Yom HaShoah and what sets it apart from other days of the year when we remember. And it's, for me, the notion of resistance as well as resilience. Because learning about the horrific atrocities of the Holocaust isn't enough. We must also acknowledge and reinforce what has been true about the Jewish spirit for thousands of years. We've been targeted, persecuted, and vilified for millennia. But we've survived because we are resilient. And that is as true today as it ever has been. We all know we've seen a horrifying uptick in anti-Semitic hate crimes here in Los Angeles, across the country, and across the world, with last year being the highest on record. We witnessed it firsthand, most recently just a couple weeks ago, when a man opened fire on 2 Jews, leaving shul not far from where we stand today. But as a community, we're coming together and fighting back. And I'm so proud to be part of this fight with all of you. We're ensuring that not only we're raising awareness of anti-Semitic atrocities like the Holocaust through our institutions, but also by increasing security at our schools and synagogues through programs like the Jewish Federation's Community Security Initiative. Each of us shows up every day and practices that spirit of resistance just by being Jews, by being present in space and taking up space proudly. So that when our children or our nieces and nephews come to us and ask us how we can be sure that the Holocaust won't happen again, we can confidently tell them that it won't, because we're not going to let it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Yaroslavsky. Jeffrey Abrams, Regional Director, ADL Los Angeles, now joins us to discuss the staggering and sombering statistics of anti-Semitism in our country and how we can combat it and combat hate. Please welcome Jeffrey Abrams.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Councilwoman Yaroslavsky, Mayor Bass, other elected officials, dignitaries, community leaders, the survivors, and friends who are joining us here today for this important day of communal commemoration. And of course, to the incomparable, the incredible leader of Holocaust Museum LA, Beth Keane. Please, everyone. I'm deeply humbled and honored to stand before you here today. Today we commemorate Yom HaShoah, the Day of Remembrance, when we remember the 6 million Jews who lost their lives in the Holocaust, and we also remember the resiliency of the Jewish people with the 80th anniversary of the uprisings in the Warsaw Ghetto and the Sobibor and Treblinka death camps. As Jews, memory and honoring those who came before us is critical to who we are as a people. The Hebrew word for remember, zachor, is repeated nearly 200 times in the Hebrew Bible. Historian Yosef Chaim Yerushalayim suggests in Zachor, Jewish History and Jewish Memory, that the commandment to remember has been central to the survival of the Jews in dispersion over thousands of years. How else can we explain the continuity of the Jewish people through millennia of migration, persecution, destruction, and renewal? And unfortunately, ominously, we are once again living in a time of growing persecution, of growing anti-Semitism, which is rising in part because of the failure to learn about the very history of the Holocaust, which we all, Jews and non-Jews alike, have committed to never forget, both in terms of the number of anti-Semitic incidents targeting Jews and the attitude towards Jews in America. It is inescapable that we are living in a time of surging anti-Semitism. For over 4 decades, as you have heard, ADL has conducted an annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents, harassment, vandalism, and assault. Our recently released report by our Center on Extremism found that 2022 was a record-setting year. Year to year, comparing 2022 to 2021, incidents were up 36% nationally. 3,697 incidents across our country, on average 10 every single day. In our state, in California, incidents were up 41%, 516. And here in LA, for the first time, we crossed 200 incidents in a single year, 237, a 30% increase year to year. But when compared to 2017, we've seen these incidents almost triple. And in 2023, we've not only seen a continuation of these anti-Semitic acts of harassment and vandalism, we've seen potentially deadly assaults in our own streets. In mid-February, on consecutive mornings, 2 Orthodox men were shot in as many days as they were leaving morning prayer services. Arrested within hours after the second shooting and charged with hate crimes, the assailant came to the Pico Robertson neighborhood after searching for kosher markets and looking for targets based on their quote-unquote headgear. Thankfully, both victims survived, and notwithstanding the outpouring support from our mayor, from Councilwoman Yaroslavsky, Assemblymember Zbur, and others, the support of our law enforcement, notwithstanding all this, we as a community remain on edge. And not surprisingly, along with this exponential increase of anti-Semitic incidents, there's been a deterioration of attitudes towards Jews in America. In January, ADL's Center on Anti-Semitism Research released a top-line survey finding more Americans harbor extensive anti-Semitic prejudice than at any time in decades. We found that 3/4 of Americans, 85%, believe at least one anti-Jewish trope, and 20% of Americans believe 6 or more tropes, almost twice as much as in 2019, the highest level measured in decades. But our report also found that people who believe in more anti-Semitic tropes know significantly less about Jews, Judaism, and Jewish history, including minimizing the number of Jews who died in the Holocaust. We also found that respondents who indicated their school taught specifically about the Holocaust endorsed the fewest anti-Semitic statements. These and other studies make clear that there's a correlation between Holocaust knowledge and lower anti-Semitic beliefs and attitudes. And Holocaust education also encourages a greater sense of social and civic responsibility, of critical thinking, reflection, and understanding. And of course, education comes in many forms. Experiential education at places like the Holocaust Museum LA, which educates thousands of students each year. ADL's proud to have the Holocaust Museum LA as a partner, where we work together to deliver a wide range of programming, not only for students, but we also help to educate law enforcement officers in this city about the history of the Holocaust and the special and unique role of law enforcement in preserving our democracy. In the classroom, in Los Angeles and across our country, ADL's Echoes and Reflections program, which teaches about the Holocaust and its lessons, has impacted more than 125,000 educators, reaching an estimated 12 million students across the US through webinars, live programs, and online courses, all at no cost. And here in Los Angeles, through ADL's Michael Laprade Holocaust Education Institute, we've provided special training to fellows, current middle and high school teachers, to implement the Echoes and Reflections program into their classroom curriculum and lesson plans. However, thank you, it's worth applause. Echoes and Reflections is a fantastic program. But the sad truth is that notwithstanding the clear importance and the impact of Holocaust education, recent surveys have found an alarming lack of knowledge about the Holocaust among the younger generations. And far too few states expressly mandate Holocaust education. In fact, in the US, only 25 states mandate Holocaust education in their public schools. This is why ADL today, in connection with Yom HaShoah, is launching the Learn to Never Forget campaign. This is a national, thank you. It is a national public awareness and advocacy campaign to improve and expand Holocaust education in California and in schools across the country. The idea is simple. Americans, particularly the next generation, can't be asked to never forget the Holocaust if they've never learned about it. The mandate to never forget is not self-fulfilling. It requires education to power it. Here in California in 1985, our leaders recognized the importance of Holocaust education, amending the California Education Code to require schools to teach human rights issues with particular attention to the study of the inhumanity of genocide, slavery, and the Holocaust. But notwithstanding this law, which at the time was the first of its kind in our nation, we must do a better job. The work to improve Holocaust education throughout our state and to ensure that it is being fully and properly implemented in our public schools as part of 10th grade social studies curriculums, that work has begun with the recent launch of Governor Newsom's Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education, which met for the first time earlier this year. It's a wonderful start, but we need to ensure that all levels of government, including both at the local and national level, are committed to effective, high quality, and impactful Holocaust education. That is why, in addition to support and investing in places like the Holocaust Museum LA, we are asking all of you to also do your part and urge your member of Congress to co-sponsor H.R. 603, the Holocaust Education and Anti-Semitism Lessons Act, the HEAL Act, to ensure the maximum reach and impact of Holocaust education throughout our country. The HEAL Act will direct the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum to conduct a study on Holocaust education efforts in public schools nationwide and to report the results in a study to Congress. Visit adl.org, sign our petition, join the call to never forget. We are also asking all of you to do your part and use your voice to call out social media companies and online game platforms which are failing to combat the proliferation of Holocaust denial content on their sites. In our recently released Holocaust Denial Report Card, ADL's Center on Technology and Society rated 10 social media and game companies on their efforts to enforce their rules effectively and respond and remove content which denies the Holocaust. And they all failed miserably in enforcing their own policies, either ones that forbid Holocaust denial or which generally prohibit hate speech, C's, D's, and F's. So when you see content online which denies the Holocaust, which spreads this vile conspiracy, report it. Report it to these social media companies, report it to ADL. Because at its core, Holocaust denial is about destroying memories. By destroying memories, we destroy the stories that form us, personally and as a community. Use this hashtag, Learn to Never Forget, as you share your stories, your memories about today, the work of the Holocaust Museum LA, and so many other incredible organizations working to combat anti-Semitism through Holocaust education. Our partners at the Jewish Federation, the American Jewish Committee, and so many other groups working day in and day out. On Yom HaShoah, we remember a unique and horrifying tragedy, the worst display of mankind in human history, a time of unspeakable devastation. And all of us, Jew and non-Jew alike, must continue to work together to ensure that future generations learn to never forget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey and me. We must and will stand together against anti-Semitism and hatred. Musicians from the Colburn School join us now to perform a musical composition by Holocaust survivor Herbert Zbur. Yeah, you can have it. Now, please pay attention because this is very important. On the back of your program, you will find more information about the composer and a QR code that will link to the lyrics. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who don't know what a QR code is, which includes me, I've seen them, but you know, we're living in the 21st century. Okay, just take out your cell phone, okay, but make sure it's on silent. Open the camera app. You don't have to do this, by the way, but if you can, open the camera app and aim the camera at the black and white box on the back of the program. Once a yellow link appears, if a yellow link appears, tap your finger on that link to open up the web page with the lyrics. Now, Beth, I don't know who wrote this for me, but in simple English, just listen to the music, please. Right? Thank you. Okay.
Freude,
Thank you, Jen. And that was a composition by the Holocaust survivor, Herbert Zbur. I'd like now to introduce two grandchildren of survivors, Carolyn Siegel, who is the founder and executive director of If You Heard What I Heard, and Aaron Aftergood, whose grandfather survived the Warsaw Ghetto. Please.
Thank you to Beth and to the Holocaust Museum of Los Angeles for inviting us to be here today. It's truly an honor. My name is Carolyn Siegel, and I'm the founder of a nonprofit based here in LA called If You Heard What I Heard, which captures the stories of grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, the last generation to ever hear survivors' stories firsthand. I'm the granddaughter of two Holocaust survivors, Moses and Leah Locker, who made their home here in LA after losing everything in the Holocaust. I heard my grandfather's story for the first time when I was 8 years old. Thank you. He told me how he survived by joining the Polish army and how he was the only surviving member of his family, a close-knit family that before the war was growing and thriving, that had jobs and friends and lives like yours and mine. When I asked what happened to them, his parents, his sisters, his 5-year-old nephew, my papa, whose eyes were always filled with light and laughter, suddenly overcome with tears, told me, "They're all gone. The Nazis murdered them." I would learn years later that they were sent to Belzec concentration camp. I learned that he and several others were kicked out of law school before the Holocaust because they were Jewish. He told me how important it is to pay attention to warning signs, a rise in antisemitism being one of them. He said, "It will be the job of your generation to make sure the world will never forget. You have to make sure the world will never forget, because if the world forgets, it will happen again." I held his hand and I reassured him, "Papa, the world will never forget." In May of 2020, when a synagogue just down the street from here was graffitied, I saw a rise of anti-Semitism not only in LA, but around the country, one of over 2,000 anti-Semitic incidents that year. I thought about the promise to my grandfather and I realized the world is starting to forget. I wanted to do something about that, so in April of 2021, If You Heard What I Heard launched with 15 interviews of grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. We now have 40 interviews on our site with more on the way. The 3 things I tell every If You Heard What I Heard interviewee that I want them to accomplish with their interview are: 1, that they feel that they've done the story justice and that they've told it in a way that resonates. 2, that the family that was lost is not forgotten, that we say their names, that we speak about who they were and their absence in our lives because of the Holocaust. And 3, that our Holocaust survivor grandparents know we've got it. They can be at peace knowing that their stories will not be lost. So as I stand here today, to the Holocaust survivors who are here with us, as a 3G, as the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, I promise you, as long as I am here, as long as we are here, the world will never forget. I'm proud to introduce one of our If You Heard What I Heard board members, my friend and fellow 3G, Aaron Aftergood, who will share his story with you.
Thank you, Carolyn, for the introduction and also for your dedication to the important mission of If You Heard What I Heard, which is helping to ensure that these stories of survival are never forgotten. It's really an honor to be one of your interviewees and to be helping you with this effort. My name is Aaron Aftergood, and my grandparents, Edgar and Leela Aftergood, both survived the horrors of the Shoah. Both have incredible stories of survival, and my grandfather, Edgar, was able to endure and emerge from the Warsaw Ghetto, where he lived with extreme difficulty during his teens. It is an honor to be here with you all today to simply to remember those who did not survive, and to remember those who did survive, but who are unfortunately no longer living among us. The complete title of this day on the Jewish calendar is Yom HaZikaron LaShoah VeLaGvura, or Holocaust and Heroism Remembrance Day. Many of us colloquially refer to the day as Yom HaShoah, but I want to draw attention to a particular word in the day's name, which is not often recited, Zikaron, remembrance. We've just concluded celebrating another Jewish holiday of remembrance, probably the most successful and long-lasting Remembrance Day in all of human history, Pesach, where we as Jews, as we have done for literally thousands of years, take a moment to sit together as families and reflect on our survival and emergence from generations of devastation that our people endured in the land of Egypt. It's no coincidence that in 1951, the Knesset passed a resolution setting the date for Yom HaZikaron LaShoah VeLaGvura as the 27th day of Nisan, just 1 week after the conclusion of our other Jewish Remembrance Day. My hope for us is that in continuing to remember the victims and the survivors of the Shoah today and in future years, we can draw inspiration from the lessons of the Pesach Seder and the ways that it has continued to serve as a guiding light for our people for generations. Thank you to the museum and other hosting organizations for this beautiful and important event.
Thank you, Carolyn and Aaron. Please now welcome California State Assemblymember Rick Chavez Zbur, who not only represents California's 51st District, which is home to Holocaust Museum LA, but also is a member of the California Legislative Jewish Caucus. Holocaust Museum LA is extremely grateful for the caucus's tremendous advocacy, work for Holocaust education and remembrance, and for the caucus's continued support of the museum and its Building Truth expansion program. Assemblymember Rick Chavez Zbur.
Thank you so much, Mike. It is such a pleasure and honor to be with you today, to be with Beth, who I will be spending tomorrow with. I'm so grateful that she's going to be coming up to Sacramento with me tomorrow, where we're going to be honoring her and her family and the work of the museum as part of our Yom HaShoah celebration in Sacramento. You know, it's like really heartbreaking to hear these stories of cruelty and heartbreak, but also courage and resilience. And for me, it's an especial honor to be here as we remember the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children who were murdered during the Holocaust. You know, we honor the survivors who bore personal witness to the atrocities they suffered, ensuring that the world would never forget the inhumanity inflicted upon them and those who perished. We reaffirm that never again is not just a slogan. It is a daily action in which we actively identify and confront all forms of hate, discrimination, and injustice head on. Recently, we've seen a truly alarming increase in anti-Semitic rhetoric and incidents and violence. In our region alone, community members have been shaken by neo-Nazi banners and leaflets, a swastika carved into a menorah in Beverly Hills, and the shooting of 2 Jewish community members, as well as Jewish students being ostracized and taunted with anti-Semitic labels. Generation after generation, anti-Semitism metastasizes, morphs, and attempts to blend into mainstream politics, continuously disguising and justifying itself. Today, anti-Semitism takes many forms, including anti-Zionism, the delegitimization and demonization of the one Jewish state, and anti-Semitism in all forms must be called out across the political spectrum. The tragedies of unspeakable proportions were the result of a gradual process of dehumanization and persecution fueled by the normalization of hateful rhetoric and ideologies. Since taking office, I've had many opportunities to hear firsthand from our Jewish community members of all ages about how the Holocaust has impacted their lives, whether through generational trauma or having a survivor in their family, be it a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, cousin, or a friend. Every member of the community has a human connection to the horror of the Holocaust and an indispensable story to tell. It is a priority of my work and of those of my colleagues and institutions like the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles to guarantee the availability of resources for Holocaust education, safety, and community support. And I want to thank Beth for having me just very recently at the museum to really help me understand the breadth of the programming and the work to really educate kids in our communities. I fully support and will advocate for the expansion and availability of the Jewish Federation security grants for synagogues, schools, and community centers, as these grants are crucial to protecting the safety of every member of the Jewish community, and I'll be working with the Jewish Caucus as a special priority. It's equally imperative to ensure that our schools educate each generation of students about the Holocaust, and that every administrator in every school district actively guard against any anti-Semitic content becoming part of those curriculums. Actively fighting against anti-Semitism is a moral imperative for all of us, especially those of us in leadership, and that requires taking unequivocal stances even when remaining silent may seem easier or more convenient. I firmly reject movements like BDS, and I'm unwavering in my support for the Jewish state. And that's not just because I think it's the right thing to do, but because I believe that it's the most effective and enduring tool for combating anti-Semitism worldwide is the existence and the strength of the State of Israel. I am very grateful to have been given the opportunity to join the Legislative Jewish Caucus as an affiliate member, a position that allows me to be the strongest advocate possible for the community here in our district and in Sacramento. I look forward to continuing to get to know the immense diversity of the Jewish community here in my district and finding ways to work together toward a future of tolerance, respect, compassion, and unity. As Simon Wiesenthal said, for evil to flourish, it requires good people to do nothing. The horrors of the Holocaust were made possible not just by the cruel delusions of one evil man and his supporters, but because of the latent attitudes and collaboration of the many and the silence and complacency of the majority. As we gather today to honor and remember the victims, survivors, and resistance fighters of the Holocaust, we must recommit ourselves to working proactively, not reactively, to ensure we never again allow this kind of hatred to grow and manifest in our world. Never again. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'm humbled to have been given the opportunity to join you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblymember Zbur. And now it is our honor to hear from one of the Holocaust survivors. Would you please welcome Harry Davids?
Thanks very much, Mike, for the introduction. We're going to make this short. Just a few brief words to all of you about some of my thoughts on Holocaust commemoration. Just a few moments ago, we heard something which I was going to say anyway, the famous line that the only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. The whole world stood by and did nothing both before and during the Holocaust, just as it stood by and did nothing during most other genocides, Guatemala, Bosnia, Rwanda, West Darfur, West Sudan. We survivors who speak of our Holocaust experiences to visitors here at HMLA and elsewhere do so in the hope that people will learn from these histories of world indifference and inaction, that all these genocides could have been prevented had there been fewer bystanders and more upstanders. The history of the Holocaust is by far the most documented, researched, and studied of all genocides, and provides a textbook example of how small acorns of group hatred and ignorance evolve to become oaks of mass murder if the general public allows them to go unchecked and to fester. The only reason I and 4 other extended family members survived the Shoah is that others stood up for us. We were all taken into hiding. This was in the Netherlands, while 71 other family members perished because no one stood up to save them. It's especially important that young people be taught at an early age to treat others as fellow human beings and to respect them, even those who are or who look different from them, before they become indoctrinated to hatred by their parents and by other relatives at home, by their classmates at school, and sometimes even in their places of worship. Technology can play a major role in educating our young people when it's used right, though care has to be taken these days to ensure that the social media and new developments such as AI, artificial intelligence, are not exploited to manipulate and distort history, which have been seen for quite a while. These are but a few of the many challenges that are facing Holocaust educators today. The upcoming candle lighting ceremony represents to us survivors a kind of passing of the torch of Holocaust education to members of the 2nd and 3rd generations. It's our hope that the flame of our legacy will brightly endure as an educational pathway forward. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Harry. I'd now like to invite up the following individuals for our candle lighting ceremony. Lighting the first candle is Lorena Gonda in honor of her parents, survivors Susan and Leslie Gonda. Paulette Nessim and her daughters Naomi and Leora Nessim will light a candle in honor of their parents and grandparents, Eva and Fred Beckman. Victor and Marlene Gerson, Joel and Talia Gerson, and Sandra and Louis Kenningsiser will light the third candle in memory of their parents, Barbara and Robert Gerson. Nissan Tepper will light the fourth candle in memory of his wife, Esther Tepper, along with 4 of Esther's 12 grandchildren, Dr. Dean Prince, Galit Prince Hedaya, and Ori Prince. Helen Jacobs Lepore and her daughter Marissa Lepore will light the fifth candle in honor of parents and grandparents Sarah and Max Jacobs, and 3 Gs from the staff of Holocaust Museum LA, Jordana Gessler, Jessie Handler, Beth Keene, Victoria Lomberg, Rachel Podber Kenningson, and Omar Sharif Jr. will light the last candle in honor of their grandparents who were survivors.
For the brave, underarmed, unsupported fighters in Warsaw, Treblinka, and Sobibor, who remain symbols of hope, opposition, and heroism.
For the lost generation of 1.5 million Jewish children who were murdered and never given the chance at a full life.
For the survivors whose testimony ensures that we never forget and whose wisdom and resilience inspire future generations.
For the countless unnamed Jewish victims, Ashkenazi, Sephardic, and Mizrahi, across Europe, North Africa, and the Mediterranean basin, whose names you do not know, and for the thousands of vanished communities that existed for centuries, who only have us left to light a candle for them.
For the non-Jewish rescuers, the righteous among nations, those who risked or gave their lives to save others.
In memory of survivors who passed this year, Peter Barna, Angelina Bilauer, Betty Cohen, Amram Deutsch, Vera Hertz, Jack Lewin, Zenon Newmark, Dr. Avraham Perlmutter, Rose Schindler, Gerda Seifer, Toby Tamber, Claire Scheftel, and Jerry Weiser.
This year, we light one more candle in memory of Ben Ferenz, the last living Nuremberg prosecutor who was a leader. Yes, he deserves a big round of applause. The last living Nuremberg prosecutor who was a leader in seeking justice for victims of the Holocaust and for holding the perpetrators accountable for their grotesque crimes. Ferenz died earlier this week at the age of 103. Before we end today's ceremony with our memorial prayers and the partisan song, I just wanted to thank all of you for joining us for Holocaust Museum LA's 31st annual Yom HaShoah ceremony. Thank you again to the Muchnick family. We are so appreciative of your support for today's program. Thank you, Jeffrey Abrams, for your poignant remarks. Thank you, Mike Burstein, for being such a fabulous host for us today. And I wanted to give a special shout out to Jen Maxey, our Director of Public Programs, Lisa Barnett, our Director of Operations, our incredible staff standing around me. It truly takes a village, as you know, to produce an event like this today. We have an incredible staff. I wanted to thank Tim Freeman from the Freeman Agency for donating his time in designing today's program and all of the signage. Thank you to our board chair, Guy Lipa, and our incredible board members for your amazing leadership and support. When I look around, I am reminded how lucky we all are to have amazing leaders in our community who are sitting over here. All of you guys, we truly have an incredible community, and together we shall never forget. So with that, I'd like to now call upon former Los Angeles City Controller Ron Galperin, the son and grandson of Holocaust survivors, to recite the El Maleh Rachamim and Mourners Kaddish prayers.
Thank you so much, Beth, and all the board and participants, and most crucially, the survivors and those here carrying out the memories. As you mentioned, my name is Ron Galperin. I used to be the controller of the city of LA, although now it's my 3.5-year-old twins that are the controllers. It's really an honor to be at this day of remembrance of this Yom HaShoah and Gvura. And as the son and grandson of survivors, participating is really meaningful to me personally. I wish my father, who would be 102 years old this week, were here. I remember sitting next to him at many of these commemorations over the course of a decade and a half. He escaped Romania in 1943. He made his way to Turkey, to Syria, and then he was in a British internment camp in what was then Palestine before coming to Israel, meeting my mother. His parents actually survived in Romania and then later came to Israel, then to the United States. And I grew up in many ways in the shadow of the Shoah and what my grandparents used to call, it wasn't referred to as the Shoah or even as the Holocaust, but it was referred to as the Churban, the destruction. But I learned a lot from them, Ledor Vador, one generation to another, and I came from a long line of rabbis and cantors. I digressed from that path, but they taught me this beautiful El Maleh Rachamim, which is our memorial prayer in the Jewish tradition. El Maleh Rachamim, Shocheine Bamromim, Ametzei Menucha, Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, Bemalot, Kedoshim utehorim, Kezohar Rakia, Mazirim, את נשמות של 6 מיליוני היהודים חללי השואה באירופה שנהרגו, שנשחטו ושנשרפו ושנספו על קידוש השם בידי הנאצים ועוזריהם משאר העמים. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בצדק כנפל לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתם, ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ הימים, ונאמר Amen. God, full of mercy, who dwells in the heights, provide us sure rest upon the divine presence wings, within the range of the holy and the pure, whose shining resemble the skies, the souls of 6 million Jews. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, be'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon, u'v'chaye dechol bet Yisrael, b'gala u'v'zman kariv ve'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach leolam u'leolmei olmaya, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ונאמר אמן.
Sag nicht einmal, als du gehst den letzten Weg, Gott Himmel neue nicht verstehen, wo weil kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show. Es wird abbeugt und unser Trott mit seinem Tod. Weil kommen wird noch unser ausgelegte Show. Es wird abbeugt und unser Trott mir seinen Tod. Vom grünen Palmenland bis dem weiten Land von Schnee. Wir kommen nun mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und wie gefallen ist dieser Sprotz von unser Blut. Sprotzen wird noch unsere Würe, unser Mut. Und wie gefallen ist dieser Sprotz von unser Blut. Sprotzen wird noch unsere Würe, unser Mut. Die Besuch nicht kämen, als die Gäste im letzten Weg. Gott Himmel bleiben, verstehen, Loyalität. Weil kommen wird noch unser ausgedehnte Schuld. Es wird ein Punkt und unser Trott mir sein.